Me? Okay, we are live now. So thank you again, Tina, for joining us today. We're very fortunate to have Washington State Representative Tina Orwall joining us today for a youth forum. Ms. Orwall has represented the Washington's 33rd legislative district since 2009. She has been instrumental in a series of legislations around public mental health, workforce development, affordable housing, suicide prevention, anti-trafficking, to name a few things. She serves on a number of legislative committees, civil rights, judiciary, finance, public safety, and rules. Tina has worked with City of Seattle Office of Housing as Washington State Healthcare Home Coordinator. She's also worked for King County and Pierce County governments. So we're really excited to have you join us to the forum. This is an hour that we are really going to have the youth connect with you on issues that really concern them. So it's wonderful to have all the youth join us today, and more will join as we continue our conversation. So welcome, Tina, and we're so excited to have you here.
Well, it's such an honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for taking time out of your day to set up this forum and be here. And, I just want to start by saying, the reason I ran for the legislature was I had been very active. Well, one, I'm a social worker and I did behavioral health for 20 years, which was really powerful work. But I decided to run because I felt like there were a lot of students that didn't have a pathway, right? That we needed to support our schools and make sure our youth really had opportunities. And so that's what took me down to Olympia. I've had the honor of working on a lot of things, and I really today, I just so much want to listen and learn and hear the things you're worried about and things you hope I will work on in Olympia. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tina. I'm going to have Sharon start out first. Sharon, please go ahead.
So you kind of already went into this, but could you share with us what drove you to a life of public service and what triggered that in your mind and how it has changed your life?
Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate that question. I did work 20 years in community mental health, and I saw a lot of people struggling. I saw a lot of gaps in the system, problems with affordable housing, job opportunities. But, I think really I was an art docent for 6 years in the schools, in the public schools. My kids went through Highline, and I just kept seeing kids that were struggling, that, starting at a really young age where they didn't feel engaged in education. They didn't feel like they had a pathway. I don't think their voices were heard. And I don't think we had done enough to support the schools. So that really, I just thought we can do better, right? This is our future, we can do better. And so that really had me go down to Olympia to work on education issues. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Gushan.
So Tina, I know we're likely to talk a lot about COVID, but I want to start out asking you something about the country itself. We're in the middle of a very important presidential election where the country is divided and polarized to a very large extent. As someone who has been in public office for more than a decade, how do you see us as a nation mending this ever-growing rift and lead to a more civil discourse and action in our political arena?
That is such an excellent question. And I think about that all the time. The one thing I would tell you at the state level, one, I think we get more done when we team up, right? And we can do so much working together. And so almost every bill I introduce, I try to do work with the other side of the aisle, right? And I really try to bring in stakeholders from the community, from community leaders, to agencies. And I do think the more you bring different voices around the table, the more we can understand each other's perspectives. And I think having that really civil, kind of dialogue on what can be really complex issues, right? And I want to see us heal. I want to see our communities heal. I want to see our country heal. I want people to feel safe and supported. And I think we have to model that behavior locally and at the state level. And I really try to work closely with all my colleagues in a very respectful manner on some very difficult issues. But I think you're getting to a core question that our country is really struggling with now. Do you have any sense? What do you hope happens?
Well, I just want the betterment of all people, to be honest. So I want a president that'll actually care about what the pandemic going on right now and actually take it seriously. So that's what I think is happening. We're not taking it as serious as this pandemic is. So that I want someone in office that'll take it seriously.
Absolutely. And I'm sorry, I don't know why it muted you, Tina. I want to actually give the opportunity to anyone else who is in the group who wants to also ask questions. So please feel free to ask a follow-up question if in case there's something that triggers in your mind based on either Tina's response or what Gushan asked. So please feel free to do this. This is actually more about us being able to actively exchange ideas, right? So please feel free to just raise your hand and I'll unmute you. Yes, Jaspreet.
Hi, Tina. Thank you for your time. And the question I wanted to ask was kind of a follow-up. Because we're so polarized at this time, and especially because you work on an official capacity, how do you have those conversations that are kind of tough to have, but are really necessary for us to come together in unity during this very arduous time?
Yeah, thank you. And it's such an important thing that we have to grapple with. And I truly believe to open a mind, you have to open a heart, and you have to create safe places where people feel heard. And so a lot of my job is to listen and hear, right? But also to bring people together in a way that they truly can hear each other and honor each other. One of the work groups I'm doing right now is with Kent Police Department and communities of color. And we're sitting around a table, we're saying, we're looking at new officer orientation where officers would actually have a mentor in communities of color. But the dialogue itself is really difficult, right? There's a lot of trust issues. There's a lot of healing that needs to happen. And so we've been doing a lot of listening sessions, and I've been doing that with the police chief. And I think you have to create safe opportunities to feel heard and really express things that may be very hard, right? And very difficult. And I hope that we're creating this, which could be the first in the country, this program that really the process of creating it is going to help the community heal and come closer together. So that's my hope, is to create those spaces to really take on these tough issues and do it in a way that people feel heard and respected and honored. Do you have other thoughts on that? What do you think is going to make a difference?
Honestly, I have these conversations often, and we had a meeting a couple of weeks ago with you, actually, Representative Orwall, with the CTC's coalition. And yeah, it's a hard process, but it's definitely necessary. And one of the reasons I asked the question was because, it's a very, it's something very hard to get across when there's something that you're very passionate about. But then there's someone that has an opposing view, and usually a very hard line view that's opposing yourself. And it's very hard to have that dialogue. So I just wanted to know how you deal with those situations and how you do that on a political and a policy level.
Yeah, thank you. And I do think the other thing I would add to that, and hearing your comments, which are excellent, is sometimes if you focus more on the policy, right, and not make it about individuals, the more it can be safe, right? And so I really try to work on foreclosure, and we bring home advocates, homeowners, and banks together. And when we first started meeting, there was no trust in the room, and there was no ability to share. And so many people had had such intense experiences, and it really took time for the group to get to know each other and to trust each other to really work on solutions that would make a fair process for homeowners and all involved. But you're right, I've learned it's a process, right? And it takes time, and you have to stick with it. But great question.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Jobin, I'm going to ask you to ask the next question.
I think Jenna was raising her hand.
Oh,
for her
okay.
question.
Jenna?
Okay, thank you. Thank you again for letting people know that I had my hand up. I just wanted to say, as like an observer of my mom and policies she's done, one really key thing that she does that I think can be really successful in a lot of conversations is something that I do with my friends and brings us to a common ground, is asking what the other person needs right now. Like a lot of times people are hurting and people everywhere have a very specific idea of what they need. And if you guys find that you guys need similar things, you just want different paths to get there, sometimes that's where a lot of really good conversations happen. And that's kind of what my mom was doing with this. Like there's two groups saying, we need to do this, we need to do this. And my mom came in and said, what's the problem? Where are we hurting? Oh, you both want to come together and meet in the middle and get to know each other better. That's a great idea. Let's work on doing that. And that's a completely different way that wasn't option A and B. And so I think sometimes when we talk about our values and what's important to us and what we need to feel safe and respected here in the US, it's a lot easier to then talk about the policies that are best to get there. Instead of saying, well, you're wrong for this, or this policy is really bad. Even just going down to say, hey, I'm hurting in this area and this is kind of what I need. How can we get there? What policies and politicians help support that? And what do you need? So I see my mom do that all the time, which is really helpful and I think beneficial for a lot of people.
Great. Thanks, Jenna. Jobin.
Yes. Thanks for joining us, Tina. I'm really happy to have you part of this forum. So currently I'm a college student, and one of the things that I'm really worried about is the current state of economy in COVID times. As you may know, that the unemployment rate last month was 8.4%. So what are some of the concrete things that the state can do to change the economic outlook and even create more jobs and opportunities for, like a future graduate like me?
Absolutely. And, there's just so many things we have to do on so many levels. And I think about the work we did the last 2 years, even making college more affordable, and I think the program's starting where a lot of families can send their kids to school with little or no tuition, depending on their income. And so one is to make sure students aren't leaving with a lot of debt, right? That's a very tough place to start, is with a lot of college debt. And I think, looking at the career paths, and I am worried about jobs right now. And, there's actually youth and young people are the most impacted by COVID and the loss of jobs. If you look at who's been the most impacted, that and when you get to older workers. And so I do think we'll have to do some retraining. That would be one of our things through our community colleges. But we have to kind of see what are the new industries. And I know my colleagues and I have been talking a lot about green jobs, and should we be producing solar panels, and should we have more manufacturing? I'm worried about Boeing, right? A lot of the Kent Valley is actually subcontractors, and I think we have to attract new businesses to our state. I like that we're so innovative. I think there's so much our state can do, but part of what we do is meeting with the business community and really trying to understand. One of our big employers are small businesses, and unfortunately they've been the hardest impacted. And so we've been trying to get grants through our Commerce Department to keep these small businesses open and through this tough time. And I have some bills I'm working on to also help business. So one, it's keeping the current jobs we have, but then trying to have creative ways of expanding it. Do you know what you want to do? What industry are you interested in?
So currently I'm graduating with a degree of business administration with a focus on marketing. I find, marketing and social media and all of that stuff very uplifting and very powerful, and can really get whatever message you want across very quickly. And I'm very passionate about it. So I'm just starting to become a little bit nervous, just trying to find a job. Like yesterday, I was stressing about creating a new resume and cover letters and all of that fun stuff. But it was very difficult for me to find even jobs that were available and looking in that particular field. So it's something that I really wanted to discuss with you.
Yeah, no, and that's such an important field and an expanding one. And I just think our state, which kind of does look at innovation, we need to be working with our Microsofts and other Facebook and other companies about how we do a good job kind of lining up positions in our state. I guess the good news is I know a lot of people working in that industry that are working from home that can actually be connected to offices all over the country. So I hope we can kind of attract those jobs, which provide opportunities even beyond our state. But you got a great skill set. And so I hope you line up something really special.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Jovan. Jaspreet?
My next question is actually that when we think about the indirect effects of our current state of isolation that all of us are facing and have been forced to due to health concerns, we continue to see an increase in the need for public mental health services. Yet over the last few years, we've seen severe cuts in these services. What do you think needs to be done to change this?
Yeah, it's such a great question. I think about this all the time. I do a lot on suicide prevention, and we work a lot with youth. We have a very high rate of youth suicide in the state. And we know from recent surveys that about 3 out of 5 youth are feeling anxious or depressed and really socially isolated. And it has a profound impact on all of us. We have this opportunity. Just recently, the federal government passed what's called a 988 system. So instead, if someone's having a behavioral crisis, they would call 988 instead of 911. And we have to build this kind of new system by July of 2022. So I'm actually have a work group I'm chairing, and we're working with the state and all of our partners to design what I hope is a much more responsive system, right? That not only, instead of having officers go out on mental health emergent cases, it actually would have people trained, clinicians trained, and people that are more like social work backgrounds. And so the hope is, and we're starting in South King as well, is to create a team that could go out for people that are in crisis, but also could help connect them to services, help engage them, kind of sort out, do they need to go down to the food bank? Like, what issue are they grappling with, to really engage and really meet them where they're at. And we've never had a system like this. And I think it's long overdue. And, I saw the other day, somebody had a cup and said, it's okay not to be okay. I think the one thing we've learned is to take care of our own mental health, right? And that so often you say, how are you? And now instead of saying fine, we say, I'm really stressed out. Right, I'm feeling really overwhelmed. And I think we all have had those feelings. And so I do hope we're entering a time, one, where we can talk about it more, and that we create a system to really respond to people where they're at. Right now, people end up in emergency rooms for hours. That's not good for their mental health, right? They end up, some people end up in jail, right? Because maybe an officer was called because of a disturbance. And so we can do so much better. And I think we will. I think this new system will provide us an opportunity to really create clinical teams, outreach to the community, and open doors from Kent. There's a lot of languages spoken. I think there's 142 in the Kent school district. So we also have to create a system, that's very sensitive to different cultures and different languages, and really create something unique for our community.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tina. Sahaj, do you want to go next?
Okay. I was gonna ask a question about Zoom and our education, but before I get to that, I wanted to go back to something you'd brought up earlier. You were talking about perhaps coming up with jobs that were, green jobs that were more environmentally friendly. I was just wondering what you maybe had in mind.
We've been looking at it, one of the things I'm really passionate about is like cleaner fuels. And I know we'll be looking at that a lot this session. That is so important to our community that's right by a big airport, right? We want the use of biofuels and things that are better on the environment and better for air quality. And so, I think some of the things we've talked about in relation to green jobs is solar panel, creating, wind. We are also learning that, again, the biofuels, we could be doing a whole lot more in developing that in our state. Right now we have one company, and I think it's over on the peninsula, and all of its fuel it sends to California because we haven't created the incentives in our own state to actually purchase these biofuels. And so again, I think there's so much we can do. We've teamed up with the University of Washington to start looking at air quality, and we're realizing there's really high rates of ultrafine particles and things that cause inflammation and impact the health of people that live in South King County. And so again, we need more filtration systems and HEPA filters, and all these things really need to, impact our air quality. And so I'm excited to think the things we could create could actually improve health too.
Okay. And then also you were talking about using less fossil fuels. Do you think that it would be possible for Washington to follow California's lead and start switching over to electric vehicles and things like that?
I'm really excited about that. And I know there's some plans at the federal level with charging stations. And we have this incredible leader, Representative Joe Fitzgibbon, who's really from West Seattle. And he's really been kind of creating these different initiatives along with Representative Rebecca Saldana. So I do think that part of it is electric. Like, how does the public sector move all of its vehicles? How do we have school buses, right, that are electric? I think there's so much we could do and create. And that is a great example. Do you have other examples that you're thinking about?
Not quite yet. I mean, I know that you were talking about switching over buses as well to electric. I think there's actually a project in Olympia right now where some electric buses have been approved and will be in our system soon.
That's great. And I heard the Highline School District, we were meeting with them the other day because we're going to be looking UW at their filtration systems in the schools, and they just got a grant for several electric buses. So I hope that's a trend that we can help continue. And I think the charging stations are part of what we could do to expand it.
Yeah, should I ask my educational question now? Sorry,
Yes, you
I
can.
kind of strayed off my topic.
Oh, no, these are great questions. I really appreciate you guys really have given this great thought.
Go ahead, Sam.
Okay, I'm a high school student right now, and online platforms such as Zoom and Teams. So even though this is the best we can do right now, it's really not as great as it could be. It's considered less than perfect. And I think that, what do you think is the long-term effect of this and the educational inequities that it creates, having this format of school?
Yeah, unfortunately,
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And it's a great question. Unfortunately, I think it actually broadens the inequities in our community. You think of not all families have broadband, or maybe it's not strong enough to support all the family members between work and school being on the internet. We have been looking, Representative Mia Gregerson, my seatmate, has been looking at the broadband issue, and it's a huge issue for our district. And we're trying to look at a state level how we can address that. We also are looking at, what kind of computer systems. The Kent School District actually, I think, is ahead of most of the other school districts in our area because I think most receive the laptop. But, again, a lot of the school districts, a lot of kids don't have the laptops. I'm especially worried for like kids with special needs, students with special needs, and whether they're able to engage in the formats that the schools are doing. I'm worried about maybe families where English isn't the primary language, and are the parents on board for the online learning? And so I think our school districts really need to, listen to the community and figure out how to maybe gear up better. And the state probably needs to give more resources so school districts really can do that work. And I've been talking to the different school districts. Like, I had a great conversation with Dr. Campbell from the Federal Way, and they feel like 90% of their students are really engaged online. And so I'm trying to learn, like, well, what are they doing in Federal Way that's so effective? And can our other school districts learn? Because that's pretty impressive if they really have engaged that level And I don't know if Jenna's still on the call, but I know they're trying to do creative things where it's a combination of online learning and in classroom. And I know our schools are a little concerned to do that, but it worries me about kids being isolated. I really worry about that. Do you think there's other things? Do you have ideas how they could do that better?
That's a great question.
Well, the only thing I can think of is some sort of hybrid system, but that doesn't seem ideal considering COVID.
Right now, I'm part of a hybrid model for preschool. Since we're an inclusion classroom, we have special ed and gen ed together. And so we have kids come in 2 days out of the week, and we sterilize. We all wear masks. Over 50% of the kids wear masks all day. They're really good at wearing masks, which is a huge surprise to us. So I think it's definitely thinking outside of the box. We have air purifiers for each room, and we're just really doing our best to make sure that we are serving and hearing what kids need. However, when it comes to online resources, we use something called Seesaw, and it is an online program that allows us to give activities to kids. So I think there's a lot of new tools, and teachers are definitely doing their best to learn. And if you guys have any advice of what tools are the best and what tools don't really work on the other side of the end, please know that right now you guys are the biggest advocates of your education. And unfortunately, teachers don't have all the answers and don't know, but we don't know if something's wrong if we can't hear from the students. So it's so important if something's not working for you that you make it really clear. For example, if you can't, read all of this text because everybody's just giving you text, tell the teachers, I need a few videos. I need to switch this up. I need you to have it in a read format for us. And there's a lot of resources, especially at the University of Washington, that can do that. So.
Excellent. That's great feedback. And again, I really appreciate the point of the importance of your voice. And I know when we're in Olympia and we're working on any education, when students come in, we're all ears, right? Because you know what's working and what's not working in the quality of your education. So again, if you have ideas, I would be happy to pass those on to the school districts or to higher ed, or whoever you think needs to hear that. But I would also encourage you to make your voices heard. Directly.
Thank you so much.
Justina, I know you raised your hand.
I wanted to follow up with different ways to supplement school to help even out the accessibility of school and between different families. I actually participated in a conference a little while back, and they talked about using other organizations to help supplement school, like the Boys and Girls Club or other outside of school groups. And I was wondering what your opinion was on that, or what you think we should be doing that way, or what you could be doing for that.
I think that's a great idea. No, I do think we have a lot of great community organizations. I was on the phone the other day with the Mockingbird Society, and they help foster youth. And we were talking about, how are a lot of the foster youth in Kent doing? I'm working on a Keeping Kids in Kent campaign. And again, it wasn't until we got, they were online, right? And they have services and supports, and they ended up actually, after they heard from the foster youth, they ordered like $1,000 worth of earphones that are noise canceling, right? Because they were hearing from students, they couldn't do the online because there was so much noise behind them of other family members. And so, I do think our community organizations, should be partners, and they may have resources to bring to the table, like buying, headsets and things students might need. So I think that's a great idea. One of the things that made me sad with COVID is usually the cities had all these great programs in the summer that a lot of youth were involved in, and younger kids, and all of those got canceled. There were a lot of paid internships, and I'm worried, that we're in our local businesses. And so I do worry that COVID has taken offline some of the resources that were available for youth that aren't available right now. But I love it being creative and seeing how we engage those organizations and in the process. So that's a great idea. I'm going to share that with our school districts.
Wonderful. Thank you, Tina. I know, Manroop, you were going to ask the next one.
Okay, so my question was, I'm thinking of pursuing higher education, and one of the things that concerns me is the money that is needed to pursue the different education options. I want to ask you about the education funds available to students in our state. Like we have FAFSA. Are there going to be other programs that can help lower the cost for education?
Yes, and that's a great question. It's something, I started working on student debt protections a few years ago, and I have met so many students that have just mounting piles of debt. And what a tough way to start, right? Is with debt. So one of the things we passed, not last session, but the session before, and I think it kicks in 2021, is so a family like a family of four where they earn $45,000 or less, basically their kids can go to any state school and we'll cover the tuition. And then if it's $90,000 or between 45 and 90, there's a reduction. So we actually it was pretty much agreed through Microsoft and Amazon and a lot of the big companies to pay this B&O tax to cover a lot of the costs that students were bearing and families were bearing in our state. So we will have a huge reduction in those costs. And it's just been so long overdue. So I'm really proud. I know the other thing people do is with the Running Start program, where you can go for a couple years and get your AA degree. But for many, many families in Washington State, a lot of relief is on the way to cover cost of tuition. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, Manroop. Gurleen, you're next.
Hey, Tina. So my question for you is so basically one of the things that I care about the most is the environment. And I know many others do, and including those on this forum, they all do as well. But one thing we've sort of all seen, especially with the older generation, is like this sort of a lack of urgency and like this lack of sense of crisis when it comes to this issue. What do you think needs to happen to change the conversation on this issue that affects pretty much everyone on this planet?
Absolutely. And I feel like it is long overdue. And I think that's a really perceptive, why hasn't more action happened? And I do think there's a lot of legislators that we have that have been really working on this. I think one thing that I think made it more on the radar of all families has been the smoke from the forest fires, right? I mean, think about the poor air quality we've had in Eastern Washington, even more so, but the whole West Coast, right, was inundated. And if that's not a wake-up call, I don't know what is. I had mentioned Representative Joe Fitzgibbon, and he's in his 30s, and he started in his 20s. And I have to say, he really came in with that sense of urgency. And a lot of us are just trying to do what we can to support him. And last year, I think, was our best session on environmental bills that I've seen. And I feel like we're building momentum. And the one we're working on now, supporting Representative Fitzgibbon, is on the clean fuels. We really want to, and whether it's carbon pricing, that's just long overdue, right? And so I think your voices, though, in Olympia, writing and talking like you are to me and saying this is our highest priority, is going to help that too. And I think your generation does seem much more attuned, right? And you're like, what's our future look like, with the state of the planet? So I do think making your voice heard, it's important. It's on top of my agenda, the cleaner fuels, and I will definitely work with him. But I think it's going to take a lot of youth from across the state really also reaching out to their legislators. And, I'd say write to Senator Karen Kaiser and to me and to Mia and all of your legislators too, to say this is a top priority, and it should be. And it should be. I don't know, are there like specific things you really hope we will address? I know some of it's at a state level and some at a federal, but what do you really think are the key next steps?
I mean, one of the big things that I see revolving this issue, like one of the biggest issues around it, is like sort of this denial of like the existence of climate change, especially of those like in the political arena, because a lot of people have power up there and they're like sort of denying it. And one thing that we really want to see is like people such as yourself, sort of go up there and challenge those who are just denying this scientific fact, really.
Yes. Yes. And having that dialogue, yeah, in a very meaningful way. And I do feel that, you know, we have this very small window to take a lot of action, right? And if we don't, it is going to be so detrimental to future generations. So I appreciate you really raising it, and I'd love to team up with you and your friends and to work on this, because I do think it's going to take a lot of pushing.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Jaspreet, do you have a follow-up? Go ahead.
Last session, one of the bills that was passed was the plastic bag ban. That was to help with pollution reduction in our state. But one of the biggest critiques for moving towards a more green future is that someone has to pay that cost. And right now, it seems like the biggest critique is that cost is paid mainly by like either the middle class or the people that can least afford such costs, because now we have to pay for those bags, and where we would have to buy reusable bags as well. So to kind of alleviate those concerns, are there any alternatives that are being thought about in the legislature that will help to alleviate those fears or those inhibitions from a green future for us?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate that. That bill was debated for so long, and a lot of us were really worried about the fees that got added. And it seemed like how much the industry absorbed for doing the right thing versus the consumer. And I don't know that we ended up in the best place. And I don't know, maybe that can be revisited. I think at some point there was all this conversation of reusable, like you would buy a bag one time and keep using it. But now with COVID and other things, there's concerns of using the same bag over and over. And so maybe we need to revisit it. One of the things that was surprising also was the paper versus the plastic. And I was really sad that there was any fee put on paper bags. I mean, I kind of understood the plastic more, but I do feel like maybe the policy needs some more work, because, you know, I think they negotiated, and I think it was Representative Mona Doss's bill that we eventually passed. But, you know, I don't know that we're done working on that. I think maybe there's better solutions. I know Kent actually did their own version before the state finished. And so I don't know if they were charging for bags. I go to the Kent Fred Meyer, and I don't think there's any charge, but so some cities have handled it differently, but I appreciate what you're saying, because it's hard on families that maybe don't have that money. So do you think we go back and renegotiate with the industry, or to try to lower that fee?
Well, but I was just using it as an example, as more of a expanded conversation on a green future, because, you know, people have the same concerns with biofuels and those type of things as well, and industry standards for how much carbon emissions we have. That all of this just means higher costs for someone. And this is just one of the examples in which we've kind of decided to put the onus more on the people rather than the businesses. And so that's why I was bringing it up. And
Yeah.
perhaps we need to go back and look at it. But I don't know the minutia of the bill or why it came to the terms it did. So I can't really speak on that.
No, but your point is very well taken. Is very well taken. And, you know, as we look at biofuels, I mean, part of it is if there's a carbon tax and that's put on, you know, petroleum and other things, will they pass that cost on, right? And that's one of the things, is like, do they pass it on? And then there's higher gas fees. So sometimes you want to, you know, find the industry, but somehow they carry it on to the thing. But you're right. How do we make these policy changes without hurting families? And I appreciate that. These are
Thanks,
great.
Komal and Jaspreet. Really appreciate those questions. Komal, you're next.
I think Jaslina has a question.
Oh, Justina had a question. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I try to switch views, and then in case I miss, just go and ping me.
Thanks. I just had a quick follow-up, and that was, you mentioned a timeline about how we need to do this relatively quickly or need to make change happen. And I've heard often that we have less than 10 years before the damage that's done on the earth is irreversible. and also that about the top 10% of society is the one that causes the most damage or is causing the most climate change. And I want to know what you think about that, or if you think it's even possible for us to get things under control before it's irreversible.
It is a short window, and yeah, I've heard 7 to 10 years, that it's a very small window. You know, I might feel different about it today than I did before COVID. And I say that just because we've changed so much so quickly. I mean, the fact that we're all on Zoom, people are using, you know, one of the big polluters is actually airplanes, right? Which affects our community. But, you know, again, you know, it's like the world made these tremendous changes of not flying, not traveling as much. You know, there's cleaner air quality. You know, are these things that we can see the results that have had a positive impact and build on them? Like, what can we take during this tough time and keep? You know, and it may be that the Zoom meetings and all of these things are our starting point for us to really start to turn things around. And, you know, we're having all kind of discussions about the wildfires and what we really should be doing to manage our forests, the biofuels. I feel like everything's being put on the table, and everything we're doing also has an equity, social justice lens. Again, like, and I appreciate the point that was made earlier, who does it impact, right? But I remain hopeful, because we've seen, as you have all felt, a lot of change in a very short amount of time. And, you know, it's these changes have helped our environment, and can we move forward? I don't know, from your generation, I mean, you're probably feeling it more than maybe the older generation. And so can we do campaigns where it's the youth voices to really bring on board their parents and their grandparents? You know, should there be some incredible campaign to say, help our future, right? This is your moment to work with us. So I don't know. Do you have ideas of how we bring the rest of the folks on board?
Selena, do you want to add to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult question, especially when people don't quite believe it or are less understanding of what climate change is. I think then it becomes hard to address. I think the biggest issue is definitely making sure people understand that climate change is very real and we don't have very much time, and making sure people understand that as a first step is a great way to make sure we get there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And you have me thinking about all these maybe campaigns we need to do to educate. You know, have we done enough? And do you feel like when you've been in school, I know studies are a lot different than when I went. Do they talk a lot about this when you were going through? Yeah.
Not particularly. I think it's also challenging because I've found that while most of my teachers definitely do believe in climate change and would have a positive view on that being a real thing we need to address, I do actually see people who, even in teaching and in professions of that kind, not acknowledge it as much. So I think there's definitely a lot of room to improve upon that.
Yeah, no, that's really good feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Selena. Komal, you're next.
Hi, Tina. So a question that I have for you is that beyond COVID, there is a world that is looking at the next phase of revolution that is based on using advances in technology and medicine. What is your view on these changes that we are all faced with?
Yeah, just our worlds have changed so much so quickly. And I kind of feel like that status quo was shattered, and I don't think we want to rebuild it. You know, I think we want to build something better. And, you know, I've been so proud of our state. I mean, so much of the innovation in both, you know, testing of COVID, you know, what would be a vaccine. University of Washington has really shined, right? They have been a leader on this. And I know we have a fund around biotech, and we've been trying to advance that industry in our state. And it seems like this is the window. I know they were actually building a new lab this last year. So I think that has been a wake-up call. And it also has shown us that when people come together to work on something, we can do incredible things, and all these scientists across the world comparing notes. I know I'm always on this Harvard call every couple of weeks where they give updates of what their institution's doing. So I do think the state could be doing more to really support this work. And of course, we're so proud of the University of Washington, but we'd like to see more labs and more of a biotech in our state and to have that grow. And it seems very timely. Did I answer your question? Is that?
Yeah, you did.
Okay. No, that's a good question.
Thank you, Komal. Gurleen?
All right, so Sheena, my next question for you is, so my parents actually have a small business, it's a grocery store. And because of COVID, we've been facing all sorts of difficulties. And one of the big things is for our employees, especially, is ensuring the health and safety of all the workers and the patrons as well. So what can be done at the legislative level, do you think, to help with this stuff?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And it's one I worry about all the time. I was part of a committee that Representative Larry Springer brought up, and what our job is how can we better advocate for small businesses during COVID? And so, I think one of the first things is when the CARES Act, when the federal dollars came down, we realized a lot of our local businesses weren't able to get help directly from the federal loans. So we really asked Commerce to do a better job to get that in the hands of small business and also minority and women-owned businesses. And I'm hoping there's more relief coming because, again, I think, businesses had to close to no fault of their own, right? And then even reopening has been challenging. There's unemployment insurance that we're worried about small businesses, and we're trying to see could more of the federal dollars backfill that so we don't have to put that burden on small businesses. I think what we've been trying to do, and the governor's staff has been working with the State Department of Health, is like, how do you open things safely? And I know like the Kent Chamber gave out a lot of the PPE gear, right? And how do we support the businesses? I know I had like the bowling alleys and the theaters reach out to me to share what plans they would have to keep people safe so that they could slowly reopen. I'm still listening, and I am a member of the Kent Chamber and I try to attend their groups, but, if there's specific things we can do, I will have a bill that's going to help on some of the property taxes that small business pay to try to do that relief. Are there other things that you're thinking of? I know you talked about the employees and keeping people safe. What else do you think needs to happen?
I mean, the biggest thing is just sort of like making sure there's access for like the protective gear, like you said. I think that can go a long way in just protecting people.
Do you find that people are wearing it when they come in?
Yeah, especially in here in Washington State, because like the mandate. But I know like in other parts of the country, it's not necessarily like that. So it is sort of scary to see that, but I'm glad it is. There's better measures here, but across the nation, there is still a lot of and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm worried, we're not done with this and we're seeing the numbers go back up as we go into the fall. And, I think one of the things that we're working with University of Washington on, and they're trying to help our area, is use the HEPA filters. We're understanding that some of it is airborne and, do we need different filtration systems in our businesses and our schools, obviously in airplanes. So I feel like that innovation and technology is helping us understand what else we can do to keep employees and people that come into businesses safe. Great questions. These are really great questions.
Jovan, I'm going to have you go next. Sorry, Jovan, I have not unmuted you. Go ahead.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, I just blanked there. So we have seen an environment like in this country where hate has been normalized in the last 4 years, whether it's been against like people of specific race, religion, color, sexuality. How do you see us being able to come out of this as a country and find things that unite us instead, like, are there concrete things that the legislature can enact, such as like tougher hate crime laws, and education that aligns with those goals? Could you share your opinion on this?
Yeah, that's such an important question. And, you know, it's so important for all families to feel safe and supported in the community. And sadly, we've seen an increase in hate crimes in our state and in our community. And it's just heartbreaking. I do serve on public safety, and we have increased penalties towards hate crimes. And that's something we look at very carefully. I know we are adding stuff to curriculum that will also teach inclusion, right? And healthy relationships and empathy. And, you know, I don't know that there's one thing that we can do, but I think we have to do a number of things. And, you know, we need leaders that really try to bring us together, right? That try to unite us. And I think there's just so much comes from, I just hope every level of government really is going to be about respecting and honoring diversity. And I do think this session, everything we do is going to be with an equity and social justice lens. And I think every bill and every action in our budget will be really tied into that. On judiciary, where I served, we tried to create like helplines for people that were immigrants that call for help and resources that didn't know where to go. We've been trying to add protections. You know, people, you know, need to feel safe, and they need to know what to do to report them. We need to train our police officers better, right? So that they're a safe place for people to call. And I am working on the mentorship with communities of color and how we train our officers really to make sure that people feel they can reach out and ask for help. I think some of the testimony I heard this session where like people were scared to go into a courtroom. They were scared that they could be deported, and, you know, all these basic things that people need to do. They need to feel safe, right? And we need to have protection provided by government. Do you have other ideas of, you think, what we can do to help people feel safe?
Hi. I was thinking maybe even having like people alongside policemen, like professional mental health counselors, or that was just like an idea that comes on top of my head, because a lot of people that I have heard of would prefer having a counselor come in besides for police. Like, what is your take on that? Do you think that would be a better option to have like an escort with a policeman, or like what should we like? You go. Yes.
No, that's excellent. And in fact, we are looking at a pilot in South King. I'm sharing it with Representative Deborah Entenman from the 47th, and it would team up police officers with behavioral health specialists. And we also are trying to link that to a team. We have what's called FD Cares, the fire department cares, and they have an EMT and a social worker. And we want to combine those services so that people get the help they need, right? And that they feel like it's tied to the community. And so I do think that is part of it. I'm also hoping the Kent Police Department will be starting this new officer orientation that I've been working on with the communities of color. And I know when I first talked to the police chief, I said, you know, it'd be nice for officers, you know, to have mentors. And he goes, yeah, we'd love to mentor youth. I'm like, no, the officers get the mentors, right? And so, you know, really helping them understand, you know, a lot of officers don't live in the communities they serve, or they may not have an understanding of different cultures. And so we need to you know, have the community feel like they have a voice to also weigh in on new officers. You know, do they feel like they connect well to the community? Are they a good fit for our community? And I think those are really important ways of kind of healing what really has been, you know, difficult. And even the process of, we do listening sessions, and sometimes I think it's hard for law enforcement to hear some of the feedback, but I think they need to, right? They need to hear and respond as part of the healing process. But I love the teaming up with the behavioral health special and social workers. I'm a social worker, so it's like, yeah, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
thank you for answering that.
Jenna,
Oh,
were you going to say something?
Oh, I guess it kind of connects to this too. I think one thing I just wanted to really remind everybody, and something my mom taught me at a really, really young age, and it really sunk in this past year, is don't live in the world that you don't want to live in. Don't accept it for that. Make the changes you want around you, and you can't change the whole world. You need to rely on everybody you care about to help you, and not everything can change, but the best thing you can do is create sustainable models around you that other people can learn from and you can share about. So for example, with sustainable energy, what can you do on your street? What can you do on your block? I remember my grandpa, moved to Arizona when he retired, and he goes, they don't recycle here. I'm going to recycle. I'm going to make my neighbor recycle. I'm going to make the whole block recycle. Now his whole unit recycles. And so I think just creating little changes in your community, in your home, with your friend group, creating fun challenges, making it something everybody wants to do as a popular, cool thing, whether it's a cool TikTok challenge, anything that can make it a happy, uplifting thing to bring happiness to the community and help our environment, or to make these changes, I think is a really attainable thing that we can do. And I wish I kind of learned and realized and had sink in when I was younger, because now I'm 25 and I'm like, okay, I need to make all these changes right now. I didn't do it for 25 years of my life. And, you can do it right now, and that's okay. And teach people who are younger than you that they can make those changes too. You guys are in a great position to be role models and leaders for kids who are younger, and tell them that they can change the world. And I'm just really excited to hear how thoughtful you guys are. My mom was right. You guys are a cool bunch, and I'm really glad I've been able to sit on here. So thank you so much for your time. I think that there's a lot you guys are going to do and can do. So I'm really excited to hear that. And like my mom said, please reach out if there's any ideas you have or anything anybody you want us to connect you to.
Yeah, you're very well said. And I guess what I would add to that is that we need your voices in Olympia. And, I could write the perfect bill, but what really moves a bill is your voices and testimony and stories and sharing stories. So I really hope, I've heard from, a lot of things you're passionate about. And so, I hope you will reach out to my office and be involved in those things. So I guess I'm not wearing my legislative hat, I'm wearing my hat, but I appreciate you making your voices heard. And I do think your voices make a huge difference. And I've really learned a lot talking with you. So thank you.
Tina, I know we're almost out of time. I mean, we're at 5:03 right now. I have a couple of more questions. If you have the time, we'll take those. If not, then we'll try to close out here. Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Sharon, you're next.
Okay, so there has been a lot of conversation around social, economic, and racial inequalities that exist in our society. We saw how Black Lives Matter movement became like center stage to the conversation in the last few months. As a public official, what role do you think you can play in undoing the systematic racism that is built into our institutions?
Oh, I love that question. Thank you. And everything we do at the state level should be, we have 400 years of kind of pain and suffering, right? And we finally have had a kind of an awakening, right, of the social injustice in our society. And every part of state government, our budget, all of those things we need to look at with that kind of equity and social justice lens. I do a lot of work on public safety, and, from bills from wrongful conviction to really looking at our whole correctional system and how people are treated. And, we have to rethink all of these things from a social justice perspective. I personally hope we abolish the death penalty once and for all this year. But I do think it is our job to make sure every bill we introduce, our budget, everything looks at this issue. I know I do a lot on foreclosure prevention. And so we have an outreach group making sure that we're reaching out to communities of color, that all of the information we share to help homeowners is provided in multiple languages. You know, everything we do just really needs to be a focus. And, you know, housing is a very sad example of redlining and the discrimination that's happened for years and really has impacted so many families. So it's building something better, and it's also addressing the social injustices that we caused in government and seeing how we correct those. So that's a great question. A lot of work to do.
Yeah.
A lot of work to do.
Definitely. And what role do you see the youth playing in this important issue to create a more equitable world?
You know, I just feel like your generation has such open hearts and minds, and we need your voices, right? To tell us how to move forward and to run for office and to, you know, you are leaders, and, you know, finding your spot in the community, whatever level that is, from the city to the county to the state, you know, really being part of that process. I think that's going to move us forward in the right direction. So. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon and Justina.
Hey, Tina, for probably our last question for you, I just wanted to circle back to COVID real fast.
Yeah.
And I noticed, well, most people noticed how our country handled COVID a little bit different from other countries around the world, especially right north of our border. Washington was particularly good. We may have started bad because we were first introduced to it, but we did a pretty good job handling it. And I just wanted to ask you what you think we could do in the future to do a better job responding, or what changes we can make, or what we can do to make sure that our country does a better job responding to issues like this.
Yeah, no, and it's such a great question. And you know, I am proud. I think our state did a better job than a lot of other states. I know a lot opened and they've had to close and reopen. And, you know, I think we've learned some really basic things. One is the use of masks, right? One is the social distancing. And we've learned that 6 feet, you know, may not be enough, right? You know, and we're learning that because it's aerolized, that we just have to be really careful indoors and indoor settings. And you know, I have family in Florida, and you know, I was sad I didn't get to see them, but a number of them did get COVID, and I don't know that they had really embraced wearing the mask. It almost became like a battle with government and science, and you know, I wish we would have had more consistent messages from the federal level down to the state. And I think a lot of states just kind of had to figure it out along the way. And that makes me sad. I hope we have a more unified policy that's more consistent for our country. If you look at the rates of COVID, we're like in the top 3. I think India has a very high rate. There's 3 countries and we're in the top 3. And then you look at Taiwan, that hasn't had a new case in, I think they said 140 days. So, you know, it tells us, hopefully we learned, right? As a country, hopefully we learned that there were basic things we need to do to keep people safe. I hope there's, you know, obviously we don't know exactly when we'll have a vaccine, but that may be the next thing our country needs to tackle. South King has been hard hit. We didn't have the same access to testing. And so I do worry with the policy on vaccinations that we're going to have policies that allow all community members to have access. I think they'll start probably with healthcare providers. But I think every step of the way that our country does, we have to be really thoughtful of how that gets out to the community, how we get community buy-in, you know, and again, I hope those messages are coming from the top down and from the community up, right? Because we got a ways to go on this. I don't know, and I in Olympia, one of the things I've seen is there's a lot of resistance on vaccines. And so again, I do worry about the next step, right? You know, once we know, you know, through science and through the CDC, it's safe. Then the question is, how do we get enough people vaccinated? Because it's had just a heart-wrenching toll. You know, I've lost family members in Florida. I know a lot of people have. It just breaks my heart because you just think, had we done something differently in the beginning, you know, maybe fewer people would have been impacted. But I appreciate you looking to the future, and I really hope as a country we do heal and we get through this tough time in a way that keeps us safe. And, you know, there's a lot of work to be done.
Absolutely, Tina. I know I want to be respectful of your time. It is 5:10. I want to thank you, first of all, for taking the time out today and meeting with the youth. This was very good. I'm so glad that you were here, and I really enjoyed the conversation, both as a parent, as a community member. So I really enjoyed the conversation that they had with you. Jenna, thank you for joining your mom and sharing some of the wisdom from your parents as well as from your uncle and grandfather. That was very valuable. And I want to thank all the youth today who took the time out and joined us this afternoon to share their thoughts and just, you know, questions that really resonate well with the broader community. So thank you for your time. Tina, I do hope that you'll take the time out sometime again to connect with the community. Hopefully we can do that in person. And if not, we'll try to do another virtual forum and get more people, maybe a different demographics of elderly people who can ask you questions, if that makes sense. But this was a wonderful forum for all of us.
Oh, thank you. It was so amazing. And I just want to again thank you for setting it up. And I just want to thank all the youth. You give me such hope. You're just amazing questions, and you just really make me feel like we're in good hands. You're our future, literally. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you again, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.